Good evening, everyone. I'm Anna Rownick, an Executive Director here at the State Library of Queensland, and on behalf of Vicky McDonald, the State Librarian and CEO, and my colleagues here tonight, I would like to welcome you to the State Library of Queensland for the first Portrait of an Artist event of the year. I begin by acknowledging the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and their continuing connection to land and as custodians of stories for millennia. We are inspired by this tradition in our work to share and preserve Queensland's memory for future generations. I also extend a very warm welcome to Helen Brodie, President of the Queensland Library Foundation, tonight's interviewer, Bruce Heiser, Director of Heiser Projects, James and Marika Sourris. Tonight we reflect on the life and work of the acclaimed Queensland artist and James C. Sourris interviewee, Joe Furlonger. Joe was born in Cairns in 1952 and moved to Brisbane with his family as an infant. At the age of 17, he worked on a fishing trawler out of Darwin before enrolling in art college back in Brisbane, where he studied painting. Joe then travelled to Europe before returning home to Queensland. These early experiences influenced his work, and Joe began showing with renowned art dealer Ray Hughes in 1985. In 1988, he won the Moe and Chandon Fellowship and a Visual Art Board residency, which took him to France and London for 18 months. While overseas, he was involved in a group exhibition at the Venice Biennale. Joe has been an Archibald Prize finalist 9 times and a finalist in the Wynne and Sulman Prizes. His work has been collected by all state galleries and the National Gallery of Australia, as well as the British Museum, and is the subject of a large survey exhibition, Horizons, at the Queensland Art Gallery next month. We're extremely fortunate to have Joe join us this evening. Tonight's facilitator, Bruce Heiser, has had a long career in the visual arts, as I'm sure many of you know. His gallery was a mainstay of Brisbane's art scene for over a decade, representing some of Australia's leading artists, including Joe. He continues working with artists through Heiser Projects, as well as offering valuation and research services. It's terrific to welcome Bruce to State Library this evening. I encourage everyone to participate in the conversation tonight by sending your questions via Slido for the Q&A session at the end of tonight's talk. Details will pop up on the screen throughout the conversation. Enjoy the evening, and I hope to welcome you back at State Library for our next Portrait of an Artist in September, focusing on the life and the legacy of the wonderful Madonna Staunton. Before I go, I would also like to encourage you to visit our exhibition on Level 4, Legacy Reflections on Mabo. This travelling exhibition brings together 25 Indigenous and non-Indigenous artists in the spirit of reconciliation, and invite you also to return soon for our soon-to-be open Queensland to a Tea exhibition showcasing the wonderful world of tea towels. Now we're going to hear a snippet of Joe's digital story. The longer version, along with a plethora of other fascinating interviews from the James C. Sourris AM collection, can be found on our website. Enjoy the evening.
When you work your way up from starting as an artist, whether it's through art school or whether you're self-taught, just like an athlete, there's a certain amount of training involved. And I always thought when I went to art school in my mid-20s, staying home on Friday nights was the hardest, that was the essence of training. So you'd stay home and say, oh, I've got to paint, when all of your friends were obviously out down the town. So I'd sit at home sulking, doing nothing for the first 10 years and wishing I was out. You realise this is what you do, for good or bad, and you'd better make a job of it. I grew up on this exactly where we're sitting. But my family, being these Cairns people, and I grew up listening to my father's stories about fishing and hunting and ploughing around in boats. So I grew up with the mythology. So at 17, I ended up in Darwin, and I got a job with this guy when he was a deckhand on a boat, and we used to go from Darwin to West Irian in New Guinea, or up along the coast of the Arnhem Land. I saved up some money, went to Europe, which was a typical thing you'd do in the arts, with a one-way ticket, you know. Ha ha. What a laugh, eh? I spent most of the time, like most Aussies, in London, and perhaps travelling over to Spain, and dishwashing and checking it all out. And I just said, oh, stuff this. I might as well earn real money. And I thought, oh, I'll come back. And I rang up my cousin and said, oh, do you need a deckhand? Because he'd owned his own prawning trawler by then, and he'd work out of Redcliffe. I wasn't much of a deckhand, but I tried to paint them on site up there, but it wasn't until I'd come back, and I didn't go up there the next season, and that's when they really made the money.
So those pictures would have been the early 80s?
Yes.
You had your first show, I think, with Ray Hughes in 85?
Yeah, and I had a show before then.
Yeah, at a community?
At a community arts thing in about 81 or something like that.
82.
Yeah.
And is that where they were showing?
Yes. And I had this big figurative sort of life on a trawler.
Fast forward a few years. So you've been showing with Ray for 3 years, and then in 1988 you become the second recipient of the Moët Chandon Fellowship. By this stage you had Max, so you stayed in France, but you also spent time in the UK as well, the Space Studio.
Yes.
So tell me about that.
One was a commercial residency, a commercial art prize, and the other one was a VAB art prize, which plonked me in London. And in France, we spent more time in the Champagne area, which was rural France. And I was making figurative paintings, and the Brisbane art dealer managed to do put together a show at the Venice Biennale, and it was a totally unofficial, what would you call it?
Like a satellite show.
A satellite show,
This is in 1990, I think.
Yeah.
Is that right?
1988. Yeah, and hired a space in Venice and put this show together. So I was wandering around Venice looking for something to paint, and I had an 11-month-old. I was there. I was by myself. I went in a month before my wife, and so and the painter I found a lot of, and who I got really attached to was Bellini, and so I'm looking at these tiny Bellini Madonnas, and there are a lot of other people wandering around looking at these tiny Bellini Madonnas too, and so the Venice Biennale's looming. I got 2 months to, and I got to knock something up. We got this deconsecrated church, and we hung the show in there. I had one big painting I painted, and I had to paint it up the steps going up onto the altar.
How was the show received?
How I might go about painting these sort of pop Madonnas didn't click any sort of cultural things for a lot of Europeans. They just scratched their head and went, holy shit. In the middle of that, I had an exhibition with these European religious Madonna and child things. Then I got, I've done them to death, do depositions, do piatas, and, but no religious background at all. So it's all sort of just pretty colours to me, sort of thing. And for people that are living there amongst that stuff all the time, there's all these cultural things that are going on, and I'm sort of oblivious to. So some of them just said, "Oh wow, this shit looks like it's from Mars or something. It's from another planet," You'd
won the Fluoro Landscape Prize. Tell me about the landscape. When did that really start?
My wife's parents were in between Nanango and Kingaroy in the country there. We do lots of weekends up there. I paint a little landscapes as a sort of a hobby.
As an aside.
Yeah. And I started in small canvases in oils, and it was my hobby, and a relaxer, and it was through necessity that I changed the mediums. Mm-hmm. So I jump about in mediums. I get bored doing the one thing all the time.
Well, thank you so much for allowing us to visit. It's been fantastic.
Oh, thanks for bothering.
Boom, boom. Good evening. You can hear okay? Good. Thank you all so very much for joining us this evening. It's fantastic to see you all here, and thank you so much to the State Library and also James and Ricky, naturally, of course, for hosting the event. It's fantastic to be here. Well, here we are. What do you think?
I don't know if I can continue the film's comedy routine.
We'll give it a go.
We'll try.
So you started out really as a figurative painter. Am I right in thinking that? And then you just slowly found your way to the landscape?
Yeah, my training was with by chance with a lot of figurative painters, and I just felt the figure was the key or the core to everything. And I thought, if I could manage something with a figure, then I could handle anything, so to speak. And so it became this sort of what do they say, raison d'être, and that meant going to lots and lots of drawing classes and extra drawing classes, and really doubling up on classes, and working through it like that. But the secret to that is that my first very, very great drawing teacher, Slade trained, Mr. Roy Churcher, he reckoned I was here, and he did a lot of teaching in his lifetime. And he reckoned I was the only person he'd ever met that really couldn't render anything. So, but yeah, with it, on the serious side of that is that I must have wanted to be able to sort of create form or something. I knew I was lacking in that, and I perhaps I saw the figure as a sort of like a life buoy.
Is that when those big Picasso-esque beach figures appeared? Is that you trying to work your way through that?
I think so. I wanted to make the illusion of a three-dimensional thing, and I just knew, I thought my only way would be through drawing and through line, and I just had this series, a series of teachers, and I continued on down that track for a really long time, decade.
Sorry.
10 years, 15 years. It was 10 years. I would have went 10 years after art school before I got into the exhibiting thing. But that's I'd say is, I could say it's standard practice, but at the same time I got a couple of pals who they were precocious and really good and sharp, and they had a show while they're in their last year of art school. Perfectly legit. But for me, it was like learning the whole thing from where to go.
Scratch. The Moet win in the late 80s, how important was that experience going to France and the UK?
I suppose I could say I've won a few prizes. I've never won the lotto, but prizes were a way for a lot of us in Brisbane in the 70s and whatnot, probably beforehand. Prizes were a way to exhibit, and we'd do things like enter the Redcliffe Art Prize, and we'd drive out to the what did they call it? There was an arcade there called the Ace of Clubs Arcade in the old Redcliffe shops, and they'd do the in their art thing. So it was a real carnival sort of atmosphere. There was everyone, artists, art students, a lot of amateur people, and it was just this big mix. And I think that was good training and good tough lessons.
Looking at the works you saw in Europe at that time, how did that impact on your practice?
Well, I think I needed those good tough lessons when I went to Europe.
Yeah.
And with the figuration, I suppose you could say it's the culmination of where that figurative painting had come from, from the European side at that stage. Later on, I sort of started to look elsewhere than Europe, and so yeah, it was a great sort of study, and just tripping around to both obscure and mainstream galleries and looking at stuff and going back and working on all artists do this sort of thing, but I used to go to even small regional towns in France had some fantastic collections of art, quite often from local people. Jacques Vallon or someone came from this small town, and therefore there was a lot of his work in this museum. And one time I was heading towards the surfing beaches on the north side of France, and stopped in Lille. And then you go and you think, oh, what's in Lille? And they had some really terrific early ceramics and things, but they also had two Goya paintings upstairs, and they were a shock, and they were not Goyas that I'd seen in the regular books, and so there were it's all good stuff, but I don't know if I wanted to think, I started to get that dream where, I think I'd like to operate in Europe or something. I think that was squashed.
Working
nicely.
Working on the trawlers, spending all that time out on the ocean, do you think that that experience sort of honed your eye looking beyond the horizon, looking at the horizon? Because a lot of your works, you know, you've used that horizon line as a device. What do you think? Am I wrong? Or,
Well, you might be right, because my job was to look out for big boats coming. And I was in tiny boats, and the damn things they do 30 knots. That's 60k an hour or something like that. And suddenly you're looking at a little dot, and then it becomes
super tanker.
Yeah, it's looming, and it I don't think it even sees you at night time. They didn't see us. We had to get the hell out of the road. So that might be an always looking kind of thing, perhaps.
Spending time in the studio, do you prefer to paint in the studio, or do you prefer to go out into the landscape when you're working?
I get really excited with the little expeditions to go out and work, but the practicality. Working in the studio, you just can't do it all the time. It's not. It's not.
Can you describe for the audience the studio, how you've got it set up? Because we just saw, a very brief sort of little glimpse in the background there during the filming. It's kind of quite organic, isn't it?
Yeah, I've got a very organic tin shed, and I've expanded it. It's sort of like a mud wasp nest. It just every year it gets bigger and bigger. It's an agricultural style of shed, and it's on a slight slope, but it gets in the rainy season. It gets so boggy there that I've got it up on little stumps, so that the water flows underneath and not through and over the artworks. But it's very cramped, because I had 30 years' work. One dealer went off to dealer heaven. One of my long-term agent, Mr. Ray Hughes, passed away, and I got 30 years' work back. And because we were working in Sydney, there was a lot of work, and it was 5 big Pantex of stuff come, and
were there pictures in that you had forgotten, and you were really pleased to see?
Yeah. I was I'm sure it's all who did that? I can't. I couldn't remember things, and it's so pleasant surprises and unpleasant surprises. So now I work in a tiny little area, and I've got most of it's storage. But look, a lot of it's my problem in that I'm not very good at culling, and
I think with the way your practice goes is there's a constant sort of push and pull. There's a battle between you and the image that you're trying to produce. Is that a fair observation, or?
I seem to be painting over stuff and change all the time, and some of it's probably like as you get older it becomes more of a habit, and it's in a never finished sort of.
Do you enjoy that, or do you find that?
I suppose I enjoy. I get the thrill out of that. I get the thrill out of painting starting to change something a little bit and then painting the whole damn thing out and starting over again. And I get guilty pleasure out of that.
And what? So prior to 1990 or 91 thereabouts, you were using oil paints, and then you switched to an acrylic pigments bound in acrylic. How did that come about? And they give the pictures, we just saw then, a sort of almost like a gouache, like a very chalky sort of surface.
Yeah, it's very flat. Your interests changed somewhat, and I started to look a lot more at frescoes, TV, archaeology, early Roman, Greek. I get more excited by the wall paintings in archaeology than most things. I'd seen a lot of rock painting in travelling, and the thing about the changing the paint was I started to another attempt at painting landscapes, and I went camping with my family, and I had to have a paint that would dry fast. And I changed over the oils, trying to do large oils, because I still wanted to do really large format paintings, 4 metres long, 140 wide, that sort of big long, because I just saw the landscape in a panorama style of thing. And I just, I lucked upon. I didn't like the acrylic paints. They, for some reason, I didn't like the look of them. I loved oils for its tactility, I suppose. But this other, I just used pigment and binder, a PVA binder, and it dried, and it was flat, and that closeness to things I'd seen in rock paintings and frescoes, I thought it gave me a little bit of an edge, a little bit more authenticity, a bit more feel,
Over recent years, you've been really honing in on landscape. Do you think you'll ever but do you think you'll ever go back and revisit the figure in a meaningful way, like your earlier works, or is that an unfair question?
Oh, that's an unfair question. No, I'd like to think so.
Yeah.
I'd like to think so.
More circus pictures?
I don't know. I think everybody tells me I need a change, and don't serve up yet one more landscape show. But I try to do the figure, and it appears occasionally in these things, but it's not such a volumetric thing anymore. It's more of a sort of a will-o'-the-wisp sort of.
Like a motif, not a motif, what's the word I'm looking for? Just something in the composition, sort of place your coat on.
You just so that I've just got a different attitude. I just got this idea that the figures merges and is a lot closer to the landscapes and whatnot now.
How important in your practice is art history? What's occurred before? We've looked at Bellini, Picasso, Matisse, the German expressionists with your printmaking.
I think a big part of my work is just sitting there, reading art books, and sometimes it's sometimes I might overdo it, and get too obsessed with, but I don't know. That's I don't seem to go anywhere without the art references, so to speak. These days it can be Chinese painting or early Chinese painting, and or New Guinea pots or whole lots of. I guess I'm picking and feeding from whole lots of different areas. I suppose as you wonder why, where we're at in Australia.
So in the mid-90s, you did a series of pictures from New Guinea. How did they come about? Unfortunately, we don't have any of those images, but how did they come about? Because I don't think they're very well known, those pictures.
I still got most of them.
There we go. Come and see me after the show.
Mustn't have been.
Well, there's some fantastic things.
I was starting to get into. I got into tribal art a fair bit, and I lived on the Gold Coast, and there was a great tribal art dealer called Peter Hallinan, who had who was a sort of a certified sort of trader in, and I sort of went to the Gold Coast to sort of distance myself from art museums, and then here's this character with a massive house full of fantastic sort of New Guinea figures, and I started to look at Picasso because I'd looked at New Guinea things. I wasn't really looking at Picasso a great deal in Europe in previous times. So I sort of went in through the back door. I looked at the influences that or some of the influences that those early 20th century painters had, and it was right at the door, and I just thought I'd seen the power of the imagery, and I wanted to examine that, and trip to New Guinea, went to see the dance festival at Goroka.
With the
every 2 years
Mud
they'd
helmets?
assemble for a big dance festival, as they do today, I'm sure, and went there and then travelled around and looked at a lot of stuff, and in the middle of just finding tribal art as opposed to the whole European European thing.
Jacob Epstein, the sculptor, was a great collector of that sort of material. Have you looked at his work with those monumental figures, those beautiful figures he made? Well, not really.
Not really,
Yeah.
not really. I got a shock. I looked at an article on Lucian Freud, not Lucian Freud, Sigmund Freud,
Oh, yeah.
and he had the most massive collection of tribal and antiquities also. But I sort of come to things late, and I'd been to I'd already been to West Irian and New Guinea on these boats, and I'm sort of, it's like I'm always working backwards, and I've been to these places, and then I'm trying to connect them up, but it happens. It sort of happens after the event, and when I travelled to New Guinea. When I was quite young, and I didn't see I didn't see what I was looking at then very well, or just ignored it, and it's later I started to put it all together, or think I'm putting it all together.
And more recently, you've been working your way through the landscape around Moree.
Yeah.
What is it about Moree that's...
More is like the extreme of agricultural landscapes for me, because it's so flat, and so it isn't actually. When you get out and walk around, there's always a little rise and a little incline somewhere. But of all those landscapes, it's the biggest, largest example of that. A sort of a minimalism.
Is that sort of like being on the ocean, when you're out on the ocean on the boats?
Yeah, there's a lot of similarities. On top of that, I'd be very relaxed being out at sea. So I like working on boats, and I like going, way out to sea, and I found that, wow, really, really calming. And one time I stopped to have a picnic with my family just outside Moree, and I was walking around, and I thought, wow, why do I feel so, really, really calm and relaxed? And I get that feeling in those really large spaces, and then the figures become very small, and they sort of almost disappear into the landscape. That's probably what I meant when I was talking about where I wanted, what I wanted. If I was trying to incorporate figures into paintings again, I just want to try and do it some other way. Maybe I've got older and don't feel so tough and brave anymore.
Yeah, it happens. It happens. So where now? Where from here? You've made some fantastic ceramics. Do you think you'll ever revisit the ceramics?
I got to say, I never know what's going to do next, but it just sort of happens. And, but there's a lot of things, how there's a lot of things you want to do, and I was saying, I want to revisit printmaking again. After I've done all these shows for you and all sorts of people, so I'm going on holiday.
Joe's got a fantastic show opening at Quagoma in another month or so, and there's a lovely little suite of his prints in that, which you have to see. He's a fantastic printmaker. So I think, I'd love to see you.
I got that's the, for instance, if I'm painting, I need to. I suppose all artists need to freshen up and have refreshers. And I didn't like printing at art school. I ran from it.
Why is that?
Mostly to do with having to edition bits of paper and be really detailed.
The
and
formality
neat.
of it.
Yeah, and make sure everything's in register and
Clean.
Clean, yeah.
Precise.
All those things that I'm not.
No revisiting.
Yeah.
Shocking.
And but 20 years later, through study of, I'd look in the art books at, say, German expressionist painters, and I'd see they'd done of an image that looked like it was very immediate. There'd be 6 pastels, 10 ink drawings, 4 woodcuts, half a dozen images. Etchings of a specific image. And I thought, maybe I'd better subject myself to this. So I started printmaking myself at home under the house, and I devised a way where I didn't have to do all the registering. I used the jigsaw cutout method with a coping saw. I picked that up from reading a book on Edvard Munch, who's I think one of the great printmakers. He cut everything out with his little coping saw and reassembled all the colours. And I thought, wow, that's for me. So I put myself through printmaking to to liven up the painting, to give it more structure, to give it more oomph, to give it more understanding of the subject. So I used to print make every time I exhibited something, I'd try and do prints of it and whatnot, drawings, prints, and and work across all the mediums. It's just sort of like a study, so that when I come time to paint, I'd hope that I'd be fresh, and that's important to the way I work, because as my teacher said, I can't really render anything.
I think that's a good point a good part to open up to the audience. Do you have any questions at all for Joe? I think I might get Mr. Bannerman up here. I think I'll just move over.
Sit in the
a
middle.
wee bit. Yeah.
Sorry, thank you. A bit awkward. Hi, sorry, I'm Gavin Bannerman. I'm from State Library Queensland. I head up the Queensland Memory area here at State Library, and it's the collection that we build, the James C. Sourris AM Artist Interview Series, that we gladly are building over these years, and we're very blessed and honoured to have Joe in that collection. I'm really just here to drive the Slido bit, so I can be that techie person while you guys talk. Probably, and it was always a real hard sell to get people to scan the QR code and to go to the link, but one of the few positive things out of COVID is everybody knows what a QR code is now. So if you take a photograph of that QR code, it will take you to a link. And in times where nobody's really that keen to speak to a microphone and pass it around, it is a hygienic way to get questions. And also we find that people who are maybe a little more introverted on the scale, who don't feel like asking that question to the whole audience, can put a question through anonymously, if you wish, through this platform. So it's a great way of getting those questions, and if there's anything that's popped up in the conversation, feel free to follow that link and then throw it in.
Cos, do you have a question?
I do.
Oh.
Yeah, I'll see if I can use a big voice because my texting isn't very good. This might be a bit of a random one, Joe. You were talking about working into previous compositions, previous paintings. I'm just wondering, when you do that, is it actually a conversation with the earlier work, or does it go from that?
Instead of tearing something up and throwing it away and starting a new sheet, which is probably a good idea, I seem to need or I seem to like the stuff that I'm working over underneath. I seem to want to have a whole lot of work and things and different ideas and even different subjects underneath. So I want to work over things, and because I'm sort of layering the way that these paints are. I might do hundreds of coats of this really thin washy paint, because this pigment, and I'm painting out of 4-litre buckets with in a very almost in a lime washing. If you were lime washing a house or frescoing or that kind of thing, it's very, very thin, and so I've got this layer over layer sort of system, and I don't feel comfortable all the time on a big white canvas anymore.
We might, if it's possible, I just this talk is being recorded, so if anybody isn't able to make it to this event, there'll be a recording we'll make available. The only issue, if you ask a question out, it won't get picked up through the audio board. So we'll be able to facilitate kind of the old way of asking questions. But we might just, there's a few questions here that have got a few votes as well in the system. People might not be aware, maybe a lot of people are, about the artwork, which they might have driven past without knowing it. On Enoggera Terrace at Red Hill, there's the Red Hill Seafoods artwork. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that adorns the top of that building?
That was a commission from Louis and Susie, the Greeks that owned the fish and chip shop, still own the fish and chip shop there, and he could see he could see stuff going on. He knew the art gallery with Ray Hughes across the road, and he could see all sorts of things going on over there. And I think he wanted to jazz up. He wanted a mural, and he wanted to jazz up the front of his shop in a sort of a in a renovation style. So he looked around and he just chose this style. It must have reminded him of something from back in Greece, some shop with painted awnings and whatnot. And that was me. And I was paid in fish. Very, very good fish. And I've been back to touch up a few panels that got damaged in, bad Brisbane storms and whatnot. And it's been ongoing.
Was that painted in household enamels or?
That was acrylic house paints.
Acrylic.
Yes, and they held up pretty damn well.
Because it gets the western sun, doesn't it?
Yeah. All Louis got upset about was I had the figures in the sort of, in the Greek way of the naked figures, and his wife said, "Louis wants you to put pants on the bloke." And I complied.
Sorry, sir. You had a question just before. Are you able to shout it out?
Oh, no. Being described as a physical painter, do you find yourself being that physical with your paintings? I still need to paint these things on the floor. I paint a lot of them on the floor, and I still need to. I don't know how long I can keep going with it, but while I can bend down and bend over and paint on the floor, I seem to need that. I need that action sort of thing to get going.
There's a question on the list which is fairly popular about the influence of Ian Fairweather on your work. Did you want to talk to his influence?
That's from reading the books too much. That's from me reading the book too much, I think. I just thought that it's a massive influence. It's been a massive influence on the way that I work and even on the way that I think. probably, but I couldn't. I think I just have to. I have to use elements of it. There's no use sort of hiding from it, the similarities are a problem, but there's you say in this landscape painting, the sort of a painter like me has to jog around between the Sydney Nolans, and there's the John Olsons, and there's the Fairweathers, and it's and the Williams. Don't forget, it's a tight space to work in, but at the same time the Fairweather is what I admire about it so much is it's the local response that he's that painter that's just up the road on Bribie, and he's been a big influence, and but it gets uncomfortable and tight, and if the stuff gets a bit too derivative, sometimes I have to you have to attempt to knock that out, and and remember, artists are always looking back at the previous, like I suppose like classical musicians, and you're trying to emulate the best parts and then sort of hive it off into your own thing if you can get away with it and survive in it. But if you can say, oh gee, that figure looks a bit like a Matisse, and you say, oh, okay, but that Matisse, that arm in that pose, that comes from a Veronese that Matisse had been looking at, and then Veronese had been looking at an early Greek sculpture sort of thing. So there's always that. What do you say? Standing on the shoulders of the great ones that before, yeah. So yeah, I see it as that, and you just got to take your chances, and hope you don't get too derivative.
The top one? Well, just anyone. We've just got a question here. How do you know when an artwork is finished?
I call him.
It's a difficult one. Or would you rather deal with, there's another question, how do you deal with self-criticism?
Yeah, if we don't like the question, we'll just...
Yeah. So we'll skip those.
Well, it's almost one and the same, isn't it?
Can I give an example? Is that all right?
Yeah, I suppose.
Catherine, my wife, and I were driving through the landscape. One day we love the bush as well, and Joe, I hate to put you on the spot, had painted this fantastic image, this great painting. And stupidly, I made the mistake of taking photographs of where we were in the landscape and sending them on to Joe. The only canvas Joe had, I think, to work on was the beautiful painting. And my photographs, I think, sort of prompted you to work on that same canvas, didn't they?
Yeah, I suppose that's the spontaneous thing. The spontaneous is also that bad thing where you just pick up anything and you say, oh, I think I've got a good idea, and
but you've got to do it, haven't you? I mean, that's what makes your practice your practice.
I suppose, yeah, I've got to,
you know, when it works, it's fantastic.
Yeah, but there's a lot of there's plenty of grief in between.
But it was good. It was a learning curve for me. Never send images.
I was going to send a picture to you, Bruce, but I'm not sure if your phone was on silent, so I'll send it to you afterwards.
Okay, yeah.
This is a popular question. How do you develop your colour palette for each work? Is it a reduction of what you see in the landscape, or do you build it up to your own logic or feeling? Thanks,
Whoa.
Peter.
That's
yeah,
a good question.
That's really
Who
got me.
asked that?
That got me thinking.
It's Peter. It's a good question.
I've got. I've got to make trips out to places, and then and so there's observation, but my observation is then I just make it up, and I think I exaggerate. I need to exaggerate colours, and I need to make it a bit more pinker, or a bit more redder, or make that a bit more ochre-y, and underneath that is the layering. I could say that if I want to. Well, when you go out travelling, you might go out for a drive out the Darling Downs, for instance, and the whole place is sparkling and jumping sometimes. Or if it's cold and rainy, it's all these beautiful greys and sombre sort of tones, and to achieve some of those colours, say if I want to end at a brown or an ochre soil colour, I might paint a yellow underneath it, and if that doesn't work, and then a red over that, and then put the brown on top, so that the colour comes from underneath. So that these are thin layers of paint, and it's the colour that I've got under. 2 layers under gives a certain glow to to an area, to an ochre. So I can have ochre over a black or a brown over a dark colour. Will make a cool, dirty sort of colour, but go the sort of warm colours. And it'll be sort of light and shimmering, so to speak. Does that answer that?
Yeah, it's fantastic. I really like this question. Is there a particular artwork you've made in your career that you feel particularly attached to? That's a difficult one.
Yeah, quite often on completion there's a sort of a degree of revulsion. That you didn't, that it didn't sort of, you didn't sort of get where you wanted to get, and that's pretty standard.
But is there a painting that now you look back on and you think, well, I really enjoyed that work, or are you just too close to all the pictures for that to occur?
Probably, I don't know if I have one thing, but this thing about getting 30 years of work back, there were I don't hate just one work. I might hate the whole series, and just go, that was how am I going to live that down, sort of thing. And but now 30 years later, I'm going, gee, that looks all right. That doesn't, that whole series, that seems like I see it in a different light.
A new light.
Probably called nostalgia, but it is funny to revisit things. The things that I thought were really sort of crass and dumb now I sort of, have warmer feelings. Because I hated I did all these Madonna and Child things, and in the end I really sort of disliked it, and but now when I see them, what's left of them.
There's some beautiful works from that series.
Well, yeah, but now I'm okay, and now I can agree with it, and yeah. So
There's a quick question about the New Guinea paintings being in the survey that's upcoming at Quagoma.
sorry,
New Guinea.
Are the New Guinea works included?
No, they're not. But I think they were in contention, but they got culled, I think. But as they shuffled through them. But no. When I did New Guinea stuff, later on years later I went to Broome and that northern coast, and in that far northern I was there about 3 months, and poor kids had to go to school there for a little while. But which was the best schooling experience they had, I think. And but I could feel a closeness that New Guinea and Indonesia and the Macassans, and there was evidence of it all around. So you felt like when I looked at the figurative Aboriginal painting in the far north, I could see the sort of the similar figures in the ikat weaving from Indonesia, and then that tied in with the New Guinea thing. So it all sort of merged and intermixed as a sort of, it was like a big trade route sort of thing, and for me, and so it was all these art things coming in from different directions, and so I was really glad I'd gone to New Guinea, and because it's it's one of the most artistic places I'd been to in the at the dance festivals. There's performance art and music, and there's painted, everything's painted, and plants are used as decoration and fibre, and it was like there's no art galleries, but there seemed to be art everywhere, and that can get down to Billum markets and stuff that's being made, and just functional things. So yeah, it was a great artistic experience, and the museum in Port Moresby, the art gallery there, it's the collection of tribal house poles and things. It's got the same atmosphere as the Metropolitan Museum in New York, in the power and the somberness and all that, all those sort of feelings. Yeah, so it's a really rich art area, but a bit dangerous.
Well, we've about come to time. I know there's a few questions people wanted to ask, but Joe will be around, so feel free to hit him up with questions. But before we finish, tomorrow is a very auspicious day, and it's actually Joe's significant birthday tomorrow. So thank you very much for making the time to come out here. I just want everybody to wish Joe a happy birthday.
There's a question here about, do you still surf? I love that one. Do you still surf?
That is a painful question.
We'll leave that
No,
for another
finished.
time.
Finished.
Well, it's a remarkable life. The experiences that you've had, the things you've done, the work you've produced is amazing. And thank you for everyone coming out and sharing that in this conversation tonight. A few little things I just wanted to give a plug to. Coming up next year, we'll be having an exhibition in the SLQ Gallery, which is the larger gallery here on the second level at State Library, called Meet the Artists. It will be an exhibition of the interviews from the James C. Sourris AM collection. So there'll be featured works as well as all of the 30 plus artists who are featured in the collection as well. So put that in your diaries, 25th of February to the 9th of July next year. So it'll be a good run. When we do exhibitions, we keep them open for a while. So it'll be a good opportunity to connect with Joe's stories and all of the other artists featured in the collection.
I'd just like to say that I'd have never got anywhere without books. And so there's, well, I've sunk a lot of dough into buying art books.
Oh, you're welcome to, loan any art books from level 2 and 3 at State Library of Queensland. Get your membership card. But I'd just like to thank Joe again. I'd also like to thank Joe and Marika for making tonight possible. Without their ongoing and valued support, nights like this just wouldn't happen. So could we just give a big round of applause? And finally, I just want to give just thanks, heartfelt thanks, acknowledgement, and a shout out to all of the staff here at State Library who've made today possible. We live in uncertain and slightly crazy times, so I just really want to thank all of my colleagues who, I just come up here and talk on a stage and make all this possible, but all the people who do the run sheets and the catering and everything else, I just want to say, thank you for putting it on. Just a round of applause. So that's the end of tonight. This is not the end of the series. As you heard, there'll be a retrospective event honouring the life and career of Madonna Staunton in September. So stay tuned to the usual outlets and we'll be doing it all again then. Thank you and have a good night.